Flint has a cultural center, the Vehicle City. Not a single public high school left in this town. The downfall of Flint started way before the water crisis. Parking for residents only, eh? Well, the only resident left here is this cat. Flint, Michigan, one of the most troubled cities in the United States. Let's go check it out. For this video, I'll be on Flint's East Side, and I start it while heading north on the worn-out thoroughfare known as Dort Highway, long known as being an area to stay away from during Flint's peak crime-ridden years. In fact, this is what Urban Dictionary says about Dort Highway. Populated mostly by hookers, various adult bookstores, strip joints, and clubs such as the Machine Shop. And since I'm referring to a trip to Dort Highway, this means that I identify as a hooker, eh? Well, that entry was made back in 2006, and it's the year 2022 now, not 2006, so hopefully I'm in the clear on that one. Well, this will be my 6th video on the city of Flint, and for the most part, Flint's East Side, sadly, is in pretty bad shape, although it's not the worst area of town. But towards the end of this video, we'll be seeing a pretty nice neighborhood for a change, one that might have you questioning if we're still in the city of Flint. Meanwhile, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and drop a like for the amazing insights, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. Last but not least, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. But yes, Dort Highway is full of cheap retail, and you can see plenty of older apartment buildings as well. The reason being is that this is a heavily industrialized area of town. Historically, there's been a lot of manufacturing off of Dort Highway, and a quarter-mile east of here, there's some railroad tracks that parallel Dort Highway. And we all know that back in the day that manufacturing centers would be built near these railroad tracks to help with logistics, so the infrastructure here is made for a heavy dose of blue-collar manufacturing, and in return, you have a strip of retail zoning on both sides of the highway, and usually in these industrialized areas, you'll get low-end commercial. In other words, you're not going to see a fancy steakhouse or a fancy clothing store. Rather, you're going to see cheap places to eat and oil change shops and things of that nature. And according to Urban Dictionary, a bunch of adult bookstores as well. But I don't see any, do you? All I see is a bunch of abandoned crap on the left side of the road, and I see a brownfield site on the right side of the road, where a giant assembly plant or factory of some sort used to be, and I'll talk about that in a minute. To the right is the site of the former Delphi 400 and 500 plants. Originally, they were owned and operated by General Motors. Plant 400 was built in the early 1900s, and Plant 500 was built in the 1950s. In 1999, GM divested the plants, and they became a part of Delphi Corporation. In 2005, Delphi went bankrupt and the plants closed. They were demolished shortly after, in the years 2008 and 2009. However, here is a Google Street View image of the site from Dort Highway back in 2008. Well, now we make a left here, and things go from being, well, Dort Highway-ish to being more Flint-ish. I mean, it's sad that things look like this in Flint today, but things look like this in Flint today. It's what I've been talking about throughout most of my Flint series to this point. Back in the mid-20th century, Flint, Michigan was a model city. The town was at its peak as General Motors employed 80,000 workers and the UAW was winning as it fought for higher wages for its members at the assembly plants. Flint was the place to be. You didn't need a college education to have a successful career path. The city was generally safe, and Flint saw one of the highest median household incomes for a city in the nation. Some would even say that it was the richest city in the nation at one point. Those glory days didn't last very long though, as the automotive jobs that once brought so many people to Flint were disappearing as General Motors started to invest in other parts of the country and eventually outside of the country. Since Flint's economy was nearly 100% centered around the auto industry, the deindustrialization of the area hit the economy really hard. People had to then move away since there were no jobs to be found, and not only was Flint declining at a rapid rate, but people were moving outside of Genesee County altogether too. This left Flint with a boatload of problems, including a high unemployment rate for its residents, which in return led to high poverty and crime rates. Flint went from being the vehicle city to being what some would say the murder city. Crime was at its worst during the 1990s and the early 2000s, and since the city was seeing a financial crisis as tax revenue continued to dwindle, the police department has been underfunded and understaffed for many years as well. In recent years, however, we've been able to see the crime rate in Flint go down. Although the violent crime rate is still 3 times the national average rate, it's much better than what it used to be, as Flint once had a violent crime rate as high as 3,000 for every 100,000 residents during its worst years. That being said, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make Flint a safe community, or one that will make people want to move back to Flint. I mean, that's the only way that a city will be able to come back, is if it can regain some sort of tax base without drastically raising their taxes, right? Because while raising taxes might help things in the short term, in the long term it's just going to continue to drive residents away from your city. The only other way that Flint could make a comeback in decent time is if they're able to annex some of the surrounding cities or townships. However, the state of Michigan has made it extremely hard for cities to annex land through its Charter Township Act of 1947. That act basically states that if a township becomes a charter township, then it's darn near impossible for a city to annex land within said charter township, and Flint is a city that is surrounded by charter townships. First, you have the city of Burton to the east, Grand Blanc Charter Township to the south, Mundy Charter Township to the southwest, Flint Charter Township to the west, Mount Morris Charter Township to the northwest, and Genesee Charter Township to the northeast, along with the city of Beecher to the north. So basically, Flint is out of luck when it comes to being able to annex land, unless Michigan reforms its Charter Township Act, which it probably won't, but in my opinion, that's partially why Michigan has so many struggling cities. For example, in other states, such as Indiana, cities like Indianapolis, that also have a history of having a high dose of these blue-collar manufacturing jobs, were able to annex the surrounding suburban growth that occurred over the years. Therefore, Indianapolis was able to keep the tax dollars rolling through the city, unlike a place like Flint. Now, obviously, Indianapolis is a much larger metro area than Flint is, so it's not the best comparison, but I do feel like not being able to annex surrounding land is a part of the story that doesn't get talked about much with cities like Flint. Take a stroll through Genesee Charter Township, or Flint Charter Township, or Grand Blanc Charter Township, and things look a lot better than they do in Flint, even parts of Burton. And the ironic thing is that most of these areas within these townships have a Flint address, since these are townships, not cities. So yes, just like most other Rust Belt cities, Flint has a long and challenging road ahead in order to turn things around, but let's do a little bit of a comparison, as I think it's going to take much longer for Flint to turn things around than it is for Detroit, mostly because it's going to be that much harder for Flint, and I say this based off of the fact that Detroit gets more publicity at the national and state level since it's a larger city, and Detroit has a lot more amenities and assets to build momentum around than Flint does. Detroit also has a much more stable economy than Flint has. And when you look at the Metro Detroit area as a whole, not just Detroit itself, Detroit is a lot more diversified economically than what people give it credit for, and for those reasons, I don't believe that there is near as much to worry about than what most people say when it comes to the economic future in Metro Detroit. On the flip side, when you look at Flint, things look very bleak, not only for the city's future, but also for the entire metro area. Same story for Saginaw, but that's a story for a different video series. But anyway, it might even take a boom in economic growth in the Detroit area before Flint or Saginaw ever sees the same effect. That's just a theory. Here I'm heading through Kersley Park, which is an open green space that sits just northeast of downtown, but to expand on what I was saying further, I believe that the future in Flint looks bleak because I, like many of you, don't see manufacturing jobs coming back, and Flint is in no position to attract any kind of other jobs in fields such as tech. When you look at cities today that are experiencing considerable population gains in this country, it's almost always due to a growth in the tech scene as companies and people continue to flee California due to the extremely high taxes along with the absurd cost of living. Some of you might even laugh at the idea of Flint being a tech hub, and that just kind of proves my point. Because Flint, along with Genesee County, has a really low percentage of adults 25 and older with a bachelor's degree or higher. And when companies are looking to set up shop in a new market, they'll look at not only the tax dollars that they'll have to spend, but also they'll look at the talent pool, in which Flint has a very small one, as not only the Flint area, but the entire state, and even the entire Midwest, continues to experience a brain drain, where young people have created the trend of moving away once they receive their college degrees, and it's been happening at an alarming rate for a few decades now. Well, now I'm in a part of town that's called the States. The name comes from the fact that many of the streets here are named after U.S. states. This is on the east side of Flint, and it covers a pretty large area. I went through it in my previous Flint video where I interviewed Wantoise Davis, who is a former Flint city councilman, and he was on the city council when the city made the switch to use the Flint River as the primary water supply, so make sure to check out that interview to hear what he had to say. But yes, the States. It's considered to be one of the worst areas in Flint, as it historically has been full of high crime rates, high poverty rates, and high drug usage. All of that activity over the years has created what we see here today, which is a high amount of urban blight. Now, this might be one of the most striking views of an abandoned school that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of them, especially while traveling through Detroit and Flint. This is the former Washington Elementary School, which was built in 1921, and it closed in 2014 during one of Flint's many budget cuts over the years. The reason why it's in the shape that it's in currently is because there have been some arsons committed, one in 2018 and another in October of 2021. No word on if the city of Flint has scheduled an official date between the old Washington Elementary and the Wrecking Ball. The area that we've been going through in this video so far is a part of the 48506 zip code. This zip code covers the northeast side of Flint and extends out into Genesee Charter Township, so about half of the population of this zip code doesn't live in Flint, and in my last video I drove through a big portion of it. Well, anyway, the zip code is home to 28,000 people, and the median household income is $37,000 per year. Only 8% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $55,000, while the poverty rate is 29%. With that said, it's safe to assume that these numbers would look a lot worse if we were only counting the portion of the zip code that resides in the Flint city limits. On the right ahead, you can see yet another burnt-out house. For many years, Flint has been one of the leading cities in the nation on arsons per capita. Other cities that find themselves on this list are mostly, unsurprisingly, other Rust Belt cities, such as Detroit, Cleveland, Toledo, Youngstown, and Buffalo. However, in Flint, arson activity has calmed down some since about 10 years ago, but with people leaving Flint at a faster rate than ever before with the water crisis coming through, the number of abandoned buildings continues to grow higher and higher. And with the city not having much money to work with in terms of being able to get rid of all the blight, I wouldn't expect arsons to stop making the news anytime soon. Well, now we have crossed Robert T. Longway Boulevard and we're in a different zip code. This is the 48503 zip code, and it has a unique boundary as you can see here. It kind of covers the east side, the west side, and a small part of the north side, while the commercial area of downtown Flint is its own small tiny little zip code, that being the 48502. Unlike with the last zip code that we went through, the 48503 is entirely within Flint, and the stats won't necessarily reflect just one side of the city like most zip codes do, as technically, this zip code covers land on all sides of the city. It's home to 26,000 residents and the median household income is $30,000 per year. 19% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $51,000, while the poverty rate is 35%. That being said, you can see that this side of town is a lot nicer looking than the area of town that we went through in the first half of this video. It actually kind of looks like what one might describe as a normal Midwest American residential street. You know, nothing too fancy, but at the same time, decently sized homes with either a driveway or a garage and nicely kept yards. And if you're lost, we're just south of Robert T. Longway Boulevard and east of Franklin Avenue, or just east of Mott Community College. And now we're heading west on Court Street towards downtown. Court Street can be thought of as the main east and west thoroughfare through Flint, as it heads straight through downtown. But yes, this part of Flint doesn't look so bad when you compare it to everything else that we've seen in the city so far. Outside of downtown, that is. And if you're someone that digs all the good vibes, make sure to check out my video on downtown Flint if you haven't already. More of what we just saw, as now we're turning left into the Fairfield Village neighborhood. Most of these homes were built in the early 1900s, around 1910 and 1920 to be more precise. A quick look on Zillow shows that there are 4 homes in this neighborhood for sale at the time of me uploading this video, and something tells me that if the water crisis never happened, that these homes would be worth more than twice as much as what they're listed for currently on Zillow, as no US city these days has older historic homes that are still in their original character and are move-in ready that go for less than $250K, especially in neighborhoods that are still intact and aren't full of urban blights. Or so it seems. But yes, this neighborhood is a nice change of scenery from all of the other troubled areas of Flint that we've seen so far in this series. Well, on this day, I continued to drive around Flint's East Side as I wanted to see all corners of the city, just like how I want to see all corners of the country and show it through this YouTube channel. With that said, I have a second channel called Chris Harden's Travel Archives where I'll upload the lost footage that I filmed during this video once my Flint series is over, so make sure to check out my second channel, and the link for that is down below. With that said, I do end the video here, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as doing all of those things helps these videos destroy the evil monster that is the YouTube algorithm. Also make sure to hit that notification bell so that you can be notified every time that I upload a new video. If you enjoyed this video, then you might enjoy checking out some of the featured playlists on this channel. Videos with amazing insights on other places like what you saw here can be found in my Flint playlist, my American Hoods playlist, or in my Michigan playlist. Last but not least, if you can't get enough of me on here, you can always go follow me on my other social media accounts, and those links are below. We'll see you next time. Peace!